G'day everybody, and welcome to this quick tutorial video, I guess you could say, on how to do a vectors to final RNAV approach in the Q400. We find ourselves here in Sydney. We've just been given a vector by air traffic control to cancel the rivet arrival and turn left onto a heading of 335. Now the method I'm using here to fly the heading is the command heading mode on the FMS, as you can see here in the bottom left. So you can see there that I've got a heading of 335 that's been entered. I'm in LNAV mode, and it's also pertinent to note that I have activated the approach manually by selecting the activate approach key on the right hand side of the FMS prior to starting this video. So we're here on downwind for runway 16 right. We've been cleared to descend to 4,000 feet, and I'm just targeting a speed of about 210 knots, so I'm not going particularly fast, but that's not really relevant to this video at all anyway. Now a couple of things to note here. You can see here that our VNAV pseudo glide slope, I guess you can call it, is saying that we're low. Now it's important to note that this has no real relevance when you're not established on your lateral track, so you can pretty much disregard that indication unless you are tracking on the approach itself in this scenario. The best way to figure out what height you should be at is by just using basic maths of the fact you're going to lose 1,000 feet about every 3 miles if you're descending on a 3-in-1 descent. So generally what air traffic control will do in this scenario, at least in Sydney, is they'd give you a basic estimation of how many track miles you've got to run, and therefore you can work on that. In this scenario I'm just keeping it nice and slow at about 700 feet a minute, basically knowing that when I pass over Erden I need to be judging by the VNAV calculated height at about 3,600 feet, as you can see there on the navigation display, or the MFD. And in this scenario I'm actually going to intercept the RNAV approach from below slope, just so it's a lot easier to kind of see how it all works. So we're just approaching now the beam position of the initial approach fix. Now obviously you want to try and intercept yourself at about a 30-degree angle to the final approach course, give or take. In this scenario I'm going to aim for about 45 degrees. We've just got an altimeter's chime there. And we're just going to continue on this downwind heading for about another 5 or so miles, just so we can give ourselves a nice shallow intercept onto the approach itself. The best tool to use to figure out when to turn onto the approach is the relative bearing selector that you can select on the EFIS control panel, I guess you could call it. And we can see here that we're just approaching the beam position as that relative bearing point is pointing straight across to the 3 o'clock position. I'm going to continue to my descent to 3,000 now, just leveling off there at 4,000. And in reality, we probably are lower than a desired profile. You can see that we need to cross Erden at about 3,600 feet, and we're at 4,000 feet. Our cross track to the approach itself, as you can see on the FMS, is 7.5 miles. So that means that we're going to have at least 7 miles on our base leg before we intercept the approach. So we've got plenty of room to lose height if we need. But we're going to intercept the vertical glide path, or the pseudo glide slope, from below in this circumstance. Now I've just turned onto a northerly heading here just to give myself a heading that I can then turn straight from for a intercept of the extended final approach course, which you can see on the navigation display there. Now you might find it hard to vector yourself without having a top-down view, so one option you can use is the map view in X-plane. Or obviously if you're on a virtual network like FlyJSim or Pilot Edge, they'll obviously vector you onto the approach. That will provide a little bit of a easier way to get onto the approach. Now what I'm waiting for here is I'm just waiting for the relative bearing pointer, the white pointer on the PFD here, to that is pointing towards Erden to hit about that 120 bearing there, and that will provide me a rough 30-degree intercept onto the approach. So we can see that relative bearing point now, that's just coming up to the 120 bearing. And I'm going to give myself 5 degrees inside that, so heading 115, and that way I'll intercept before Erden. If I was to turn onto the exact bearing to Erden, I'm going to intercept it right on Erden, and for the purposes of this video I wanted to intercept before the actual fix at Erden. So heading 115 should work nicely. Now, assuming that heading that I've been given has been given to me with the addition of intercepting final approach course, which I'm going to assume that it has, I can therefore hit the intercept button there. And what that does is that means that when I do come through the CDI there, the aircraft will automatically intercept the inbound track rather than going straight through it on the heading of 115. The other option you've got here is, rather than using the command heading mode, you can actually just use the standard heading select option, and then as you approach the final approach course LNAV. But using the command heading mode just keeps it nice and easy. You can stay in LNAV mode the whole time. And it also stops you from the possibility of overshooting the final approach course because you forgot to press the LNAV button. So it's easy to see here, we're about 2,500 feet below a standard 3-in-1 descent, or a 3-degree profile. There's nothing wrong with that. Quite a standard procedure that they use in places like Sydney is to descend you down earlier than necessarily a constant descent would have you at. And so in this scenario we've leveled off at 3,000 feet and we will intercept the pseudo glide slope from below. There's just a bit of varying terrain around here, so we're going to get a couple of 2,500 RA callouts. That's perfectly normal.
2,500. 2,500.
Now as you're coming up to the final approach course, you can monitor a couple of things. You can monitor the cross-track error there on the FMS, so you can see that's just counting now through about 0.5 miles. You'll start to see the CDI come in on the PFD there, and the intercept mode should start to intercept the final approach course. So you can see there it's starting to come over now. Might get a small overshoot, but will certainly remain within half scale deflection, which is within tolerance. In the real aircraft it sometimes does have a tendency to overshoot, so one of the options you can use is TCS mode just to bring it back, obviously being careful that you don't bank over too much and get a GPWS bank angle. So we're now established on the final approach course. We can see with our pseudo glide slope there that it's still showing a full fly up command, so we are below it. And all we're waiting for now is, as our last assigned altitude from air traffic control would have been 3,000, assuming that we were in cloud and we weren't visual, we technically can't descend below that until we're past the initial approach fix, which is Erden. So we'll wait till we pass Erden. Once we pass Erden, we can then set the decision altitude, in this case 520 feet. So we'll round that up to 600 feet, and we can arm the VNAV, which will then automatically intercept the pseudo glide slope when it becomes active. So there's Erden. We'll set the decision altitude, arm VNAV, and now we're just waiting for that pseudo glide slope to coming down. So we can see here it's now live. Start thinking about configuring the aircraft for landing, VNAV path, and we're now established on the pseudo glide slope on an RNAV approach. Gear down,
25,
flap
100.
5. And I mean, there's a wide range of ways you can fly this in terms of configuring. I'm going to be rather conservative and configure quite early just for the purposes of this video, but thanks to the range of speed you've got with the gear and flap in the Q400, you can configure quite late. So you can see there that the FMS has now switched to approach. So what that means is the sensitivities of the CDI scale decrease quite significantly. So half scale deflection on this is going to be a lot more sensitive than you would have had when it was in terminal mode prior to the switching of it into approach mode. Okay, flap 15, we're going to do a reduced MP landing. Bleeds come to min. Landing taxi light on for clearance to land. And now we just get ready to smash it on. Gonna have an FMS message there, most likely about the next VNAV leg becoming invalid. We've got the altimeter chime there, it's 1,000 to go to the decision altitude. So we can set the missed approach altitude of 3,000 feet in the case of a missed approach. So 3,000 set. So the aircraft's fully configured for a flap 15 landing onto 16 right at Sydney. I've said about all I need to for this video, so I'll let the video run out. You can watch me smash it onto the deck, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to write a comment or have a yarn in the Discord. Thanks for watching.
One hundred. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10.